Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Newmeyer, film critic for WOR Radio. Let's have one more round of applause for the terrific and amazing Icon of Life. This is one of the special things I have seen this year. It's absolutely incredible. And please welcome Tom Hiddleston and Ren Schmidt. Congratulations to both of you on this amazing film. Tom, there are so many levels to Hank Williams, and I feel as if you get sort of so deep into it, into the solemnity, into the seriousness, the soulfulness. What was the key to Hank Williams for you?
I think the key for me was I wanted to explore the tension between his what I saw as his external charisma and his internal vulnerability. I was fascinated by the fact that he was clearly an electrifying performer on stage, like someone who really who set the world alight at a particular time. And there's a reason we're making a film about Hank Williams. We're not making a film about Roy Acuff or Ernest Tubb, who were big stars at the time, hit records on the Billboard chart. But Hank obviously had this other extra special thing. But as a songwriter, the lyrics and the pure simplicity of the poetry came from a great reservoir of personal pain, and those two things seem to be in tension with each other, which I found really interesting.
Hank the person is amazing. Hank the iconic figure in American history is amazing, but there's also the level of the music. I would imagine that getting to know this music and performing it yourself is almost like learning another character, right?
Yeah, it was challenging.
That's you on all these songs.
That's me singing. Yeah. But there were two strands to the singing, really. One was relearning in instinct my rhythm and my pitch. I'm a natural baritone, and what's happening? I'm a natural baritone, and Hank is a natural tenor. And but actually, the great challenge was to transmit the power of his songs. I had to get inside those emotions for myself. So he's singing from some of those songs are very, very dark, and they communicate sadness and loneliness and a mournfulness that really the only way I was going to communicate the power of the song was to interpret that sadness and loneliness myself and try and get inside the songs in that way. And that was actually much more like acting than it was like anything else.
And you're not naturally a singer. That is the first time you sung on film. You're not.
That's the first time I've ever sang, really.
That is a high bar, I would say.
Apart from missed sort of low moments in a karaoke bar. Yeah, that's the first time I've ever done that.
Absolutely astounding. Ren, let's talk about Bobby Jett, because I feel like she's a formidable force. That scene on the dock, I feel it's so adult, it's so mature. There's so much going on when Hank says, "You don't want to marry me," and she says, "I will." There's a strength to her. She's willing to do something in regards to their relationship, right?
Well, I think at that time women didn't have many choices, and she was a single mother already. I mean, that's kind of what the joke is at the beginning of the scene, that Hank tends to fall into things with women that already have children. So I think she's really kind of putting herself out there and hoping, I think, for something that's maybe more than just marriage. But I think she also she really sees him, and I think she knows kind of who he is. She's not asking him to be something that he's not. So I think she kind of knows what she's getting into. But I think in that scene, what's so heartbreaking is that she needs the support and the structure in order to have this baby, and Hank doesn't. I don't think he doesn't want to be in a loveless marriage. He's already done that. And I don't think that means that Audrey and Hank weren't in love. I think that by the time they, things were ending, things were very hard. But yeah, I think she really is. She's a force to be reckoned with. And I think part of that is because she's willing to be honest. And I think oftentimes in those situations, most people aren't, you hide. And I think the thing that's so beautiful about that scene is I think they're both being very honest.
Well, the scene with Ren on the dock is one of my favorite scenes in the film. It was one of my favorite scenes to shoot, and I love it because Mark Abraham, our director, he had such compassion for both characters in that moment, that there really is nowhere else to go but to tell the truth to each other. They're neither of them are in an easy place, and they're sat there at the end of that dock in a unforeseen situation, and so what I love about his writing in that moment is that they find humor in it, even in a sad place. They find a way to connect and tell the truth to each other, and I think it's a hugely generous thing he did to play it in one shot. It doesn't cut away to close-ups. It exists in a two-shot, and it was such a pleasure playing it with Ren. She's such an amazing scene partner, and we were right there together, and I watched that back, and it brings back a very happy memory for me.
Amazing scene. We're going to take a couple of questions in just one moment, but I just want to bring up and ask you this point about Hank. People forget that Hank Williams was sort of the first musical star to die of his own hand, essentially, to die of his vices. Essentially, alcoholism killed him. Prior to that, Benny Goodman had died and George Gershwin, but it wasn't essentially by their own vices, and that was part of his iconic status and part of his tragic story, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think Hank Williams is now frozen in time in this moment, and we have no image of him as an older man, and we have no knowledge of what his music would have been like in his seniority. And it's so interesting how he casts such a long shadow, because there's something so honest about the moment that he caught, so youthful and so energetic, that never matured, and I find it very tragic, because there's a conversation to be had about, is it necessary to create great art to live at a particular pitch of intensity which destroys you? And there are so many musicians who have burned twice as bright and not for long. It's a terrifying list, really. Janis Joplin, Amy Winehouse, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, and it extends into James Dean and Marilyn Monroe and Heath Ledger, people who left us too soon. And I just find it very sad. I wish we'd known the Hank Williams that wrote music into to later in life. I wish we'd seen that person.
Amazing to think about what the changes of the 50s and 60s would have done for Hank Williams, who dies before that hits an American culture.
You compare Hank to someone like Bob Dylan, and Bob Dylan has gone on record time and time again, and said that he wouldn't have become a folk musician without Hank Williams. And Bob Dylan's still cutting tracks today, still writing new material, and it's such a shame that we never got to see that side of Hank.
I'll take some questions now. Anybody?
Hi Tom, this is an amazing movie, and I want to know, it's a very sad movie, so after this movie, how do you get yourself out of the emotion? And also, you have been giving so many positive influence, and I want to know where you got your positivity and how do you drain out that?
What's the last bit?
Drain out the bad emotion.
Great question. Well, I finished this film just before Christmas in 2014. So the best thing to do was to go home and hang out with my sisters and have them take the piss out of me, basically. It's very refreshing. Go home, go back to your family, go back to your friends, make Christmas dinner, and play party games and essentially mess around. So it was very reassuring to be back back with my family. And thank you for what you've said. Hello.
Okay.
That was amazing. It was a very theatrical run. Would you like to be an actress? I'm sorry, I won't draw attention to you anymore. Sorry, just shooting a little movie back there. Yeah, in terms of positivity, thank you for that. I don't know. I enjoy things, and that's it really. I can't explain it. I just I think possibly there was a time, maybe about 10 years ago, where I just realized that we, this isn't a dress rehearsal, and you've got to enjoy things while they last. An old friend of mine says you have to smell the roses because they don't last. They wither on the vine, and you can't put that off. So I try to appreciate, you try to appreciate life as it comes to you, because God forbid it passes you by and you get to a time where you look back and say, I wish I'd done this, I wish I had tried this. You have to try and you have to indulge in what is in front of you, and mine it for all it's worth, because we don't get another chance. We're not coming back.
It's a great question. Yeah, you had a question right here?
Hi. So you obviously have like a really great range as an actor from theater, film, and television. So I was kind of wondering how you switch from playing, Shakespeare on stage to someone like Hank Williams.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and if my response is strange, it's because it doesn't feel that different. I can see that it looks very different, but the every time there's something quite similar about the experience, which is that I feel my job is to step inside another human life, be it real or fictional, and represent their truth. And there will be aspects of their truth to which we can all relate. They are universal feelings. And my job is simply to get inside that and reflect it back. Whether the words are the rage-filled, destructive words of Coriolanus, or the lyrics of Hank Williams, it's still an investment of compassion and commitment. And if acting has any power at all in the world, it is the power to connect people by showing that we all experience the same feelings. Essentially, it's an act of imagination and commitment in that regard.
Ren, what are your thoughts on that in terms of bouncing between comedy and drama and different tones like that? How do you kind of keep a steady hand in that way?
I think I tend to rely on the writing. As an actor, that's kind of where I start, and oftentimes I think I try and wait as long as I can to lock myself into something until I feel like I really understand kind of inherently how a character moves through a story. So I feel like that's where I start, and actually I started out doing theater where you definitely have a beginning and an end, but then I started doing a lot of television. And the beauty of that is that you don't know where the character is going, just like none of us knows what will happen 5 minutes after we walk out of the theater. So it's kind of weirdly very freeing, because then you just get to focus on the scene and that moment and that time. And I feel like weirdly part of what lent itself, I think, to playing this part was the fact that there are only 5 scenes or 4 scenes in the movie where Bobby appears, and I just approached each one separately. As like, what's kind of like the kernel in this scene that's happening for her, and just, and also what's the relationship, because I also think in all of those scenes the relationship between Hank and Bobby Jett is different. It's definitely progressing, even though it's in kind of like minute, very nuanced ways. But yeah, writing for me is always where I start. It's the thing that helps free me the most, because it gets me, if I can get it into my body, weirdly it gets me out of my head, which is a bad place to be when you're an actor.
Interestingly, I'm not sure if writer-director Mark Abraham probably planned it this way, but in a way that scene at the dock could almost be like a 5-minute short film or a one-act stage on play, right?
Over
right,
and over
yeah,
again.
yeah.
Really, let us do it again. Can we just do it one more time? Come on.
Yeah.
Mark, let us do it again.
Yeah.
It was so fulfilling to do.
Yeah, it's like a short, it absolutely could have been like a short play, absolutely, yeah. Let's take another question in the back on the left-hand side right here. Right here in the green, that's right. Okay, right here.
Hi, this is for the both of you. And what do you think is the hardest part of acting for you?
Good question from these guys tonight.
Do you mean the craft or just the life of being an actor?
Craft.
The craft.
I think being present for me. I mean, the funny thing is working with this guy. He's so present that really all you have to do is if you've done your homework before you get to set, you just let go, and the scene's there, and he's there, and you are maybe one of the most spontaneous actors I've ever worked with. No, that's really true. Like moment to moment, he's gonna react to what you give him, and I mean, I can say from experience that's not always the case. I mean, I worked with somebody recently where I was like, he's not there, and I crossed my eyes at him in a moment because I was like, I wonder if he's gonna see this. No. I was like, I know.
Oh dear.
But I think being present in that way because you feel like if you can, I guess, get out of your head enough and be present enough to focus on the other person, which I think as an actor is the most important person in the scene, then you're available and you stop kind of being a me monster. I think it's very easy as an actor to be kind of assessing how you're doing as you're going through a scene and, did I hit that thing I wanted to hit? But to me, the special part of what we do is the thing that exists here. It's the thing that exists between the two people, and if you can be present, which is really hard. I mean, the minute somebody turns a camera on you, people freeze, and I think actors do kind of instinctively. But yeah, I think that's actually strangely very hard.
Yeah, and oddly enough, I think the act of being present is made easier by something which is quite difficult, which some actors are quite lazy about. Some, not everyone, but there are people that have different methodologies and processes, and they should. But I find the hard thing is that when you're on set and I'm with Ren and it's basically a game of tennis, and that's the fun bit, is it feels like a dance, and if one person takes a step forward, the other person takes a step back, and you're in the same moment, and it feels great. And that's where the juice of it is for me. The hardest part is the bit you have to do on your own, which is before you go to work and before the cameras roll, which is to construct in your mind a context for the character to live in, so that you're not emptily being free in the moment. You're being free within certain parameters that are appropriate for the character and the story, so that work is academic almost. It's academic research, it's reading, it's thinking, it's researching, and it's very lonely and solitary because nobody really does it with you. But the harder you work at that, the more fun it is when you get on set, because you feel like things become automatic and unconscious in a great way. That therefore you don't have to be deliberate. I suppose that was the hardest bit for me about playing Hank, was the 5 or 6 weeks of very solitary study that I did to sound like him and to look like him and to understand his psychology, so that when I turned up on set with Ren or Lizzie or Maddie or Cherry Jones or Bradley Whitford, I was free to just be in the moment with them, and it serve in return. And that feels much more complicit and much more gratifying than the very solitary academic stuff.
Some actors say that just like in life, the trick is really listening. And so it was kind of related to what you guys are saying, that even though you know what the lines are going to be, to really listen to the other person is really part of the key. Yeah. We have time for about 2 more. Right, right here. Okay, let's go actually towards the back. First one there on your left. Yeah.
Can I just say that you really inspire me as an actress, and I loved all your works, but this one actually really touched my heart. I was wondering, because Hank had an interesting life, like it was complex yet exciting. What did you actually find most fascinating about him?
I think honestly, it was that the more successful he became, the more lonely he became. as a friend of his used to, a friend of his that I got in a documentary about his life called Danny Dill. There's some beautiful interviews with Don Helms, who lived to a ripe old age, a steel player. And Danny, who talked with him a couple of times, used to say, hello. So running to the front. Okay. So Danny Dill used to say that the thing about Hank was all his life he wanted to get up there, get up on that stage and be somebody. And he got up there and found there was nothing there. It was all back down where he'd come from. And that was tragic to me, that actually he'd spent his whole life trying to get on the Opry, trying to be a star. And the more successful he became, the more famous he became, the more he felt like people were trying to slice him up and take from him something that he didn't feel he had possession of anymore, and it only isolated him further. And from that isolation, he made consistently bad choices. He fell into terrible habits with alcohol and with prescription drugs. He was unintentionally cruel to people who loved him, and it was as if his fame ate him up from the inside. I found that really fascinating.
Is it alright if I ask you one more question? I was wondering how it was working with Elizabeth Olsen, because she's one of my favorite actresses.
She's amazing, truly. She, like Ren, is so present and she's so alive in the moment. And I think what she's done with Audrey Mae Shepherd, Audrey has in the history books has a bit of a rough ride. She's been written as impetuous and shrewish and obstructive, and without Audrey, really, there is no Hank. She had a great head for business in a way that he didn't. She introduced him to his business contacts, to the producers of radio stations. She got him on the Opry. She made those calls, and I think also, as I hope you can glean from the film, is that their relationship and that the passion and turbulence of their marriage became the engine for Hank's songs. That's my idea, and Mark's idea is that we agreed that you can't to be inside that marriage has to have an effect on your songwriting, and I think Elizabeth played Audrey with such compassion and from such a place of empathy, and she defended her, and she fought for Audrey in a way that I think gives her. You see through Elizabeth's performance how hard it must have been to live with a man like Hank, and I think that's a beautiful gift to Audrey's legacy.
I'm going to wrap up with just a question about preparing for the music. You mentioned going away for a couple of weeks to try and really kind of get him down. There was a story about a dog and about preparing for these songs that you want to share with them, Tom. It's a very good story.
Okay, so I don't know how many of you may know. I prepared for this by going to Nashville. We shot in Shreveport, and I went to Nashville 5 weeks before, principal photography, to live with a man called Rodney Crowell, who is an extraordinary musician in his own right. He's been making music for 40 years. He's toured with Emmylou Harris. He's won Grammys, and he saw Hank on his father's shoulders at the age of 2. It's one of his earliest memories, and he was my guide through the woods, the dark and thorny woods of trying to get this right. And he used to. He's such a keeper of the flame. He was so exacting in his notes about my singing. We'd be in his studio at the back of his house, and he'd be at the soundboard with his friend and son-in-law Dan, who's a terrific sound engineer. And I was struggling with Lovesick Blues. Lovesick Blues is really technically challenging. The yodel goes up, you go up and down and up and down. You have to hit the yodel on the right pitch and come back down, and he sings out of rhythm. The stuff Fred Rose says in the movie is true. Everyone thought Lovesick Blues was terrible. And it was a terrible idea to lay down as a record, and he insisted that when he sang it live, he got this great response. It made him a star. Anyway, I knew I had to get the song right. And we did take after take after take after take after take, and I was going crazy, bashing my head against the brick wall, basically. And if Rodney would say, Tommy boy, we gotta go again. Your rhythm's good, your pitch is fine, but you're not rocking it. You gotta rock the song. So I would go again, and eventually, Rodney has this little dog, this little spotted dog called Mono. And sometimes he'd be in the studio with us, just chilling. And I must have done 40 takes of Lovesick Blues, and I've been singing for 5 hours, and I said, I just couldn't get it. And I was like, okay guys, gentlemen, I have to take 5 minutes. I just have to take 5 minutes. I know we're going to keep going, but I've got to step away. And I took Mono with me, this tiny little dog, and we went out and sat in Rodney's garden, and Mono had such a blissful and ignorant, unaware delight in the afternoon sun. He had no idea the battle that I was fighting. And he came up and he sat on my lap, and I just looked him in the face and I said, Mono, how am I going to do this? And Mono didn't give a shit. He just went for another lap of the garden. But it was nice to have his company. There was some white knuckle moments and some sleepless nights on this, because I just didn't think I was going to get it. I really didn't. And I couldn't find a way around it. It was like climbing a mountain, and you can't find a handhold up the next piece of the cliff face. And as I knew I had to get to the summit, it was a terrifying thing. But here I am sitting in front of you, so.
Absolutely. You all did absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Hiddleston, Brent Smith, movie is I Saw the Light. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming up.
Thank you.
好多宝宝，天哪，拜拜。